In January 1920, Chicago did not suddenly become sober. The city woke under a new law, but not under a new appetite. Snow lay along the sidewalks. Smoke rose from factories and rail yards. The Chicago River cut through the city like a dark industrial vein, carrying barges, sewage, timber, and the smell of work. Above it all stood a city built by immigrants, meatpackers, steelworkers, bankers, politicians, and dreamers. A city that had learned to grow fast, fight hard, and hide things in plain sight. The 18th Amendment had gone into effect. The Volstead Act had made it illegal to manufacture, sell, or transport intoxicating liquor. Across the United States, reformers celebrated what they believed was the beginning of a cleaner, safer, more moral nation. But in Chicago, Prohibition did not end drinking. It gave drinking an empire. Chapter 1. The City That Was Ready. Chicago, in 1920, was already a city of contradictions. It was modern and brutal, rich and desperate, elegant and filthy. Downtown hotels glowed with electric lights, while working-class neighborhoods crowded into tenements and boarding houses. Trains arrived every day, carrying people from the American South, from Eastern Europe, from Italy, Ireland, Poland, Lithuania, and beyond. This was a city of neighborhoods, and each neighborhood had its own language: church, corner store, saloon, and political boss. Before Prohibition, the saloon was not just a place to drink. It was a social club, an employment office, a political headquarters, a place where a man could cash a paycheck, hear gossip, find help, or lose everything. For many immigrants, the saloon was one of the first institutions that welcomed them. Then the law tried to erase it, but Chicago had already mastered the art of informal power. Politicians traded favors for votes. Police captains knew which doors to ignore. Judges understood which men mattered. Ward bosses controlled blocks the way kings controlled territory. So when alcohol became illegal, the city did not collapse into silence. It reorganized. Behind barbershops, restaurants, flower stores, funeral homes, and apartment doors, the old saloon transformed into something darker, more secretive, and more profitable: the speakeasy. Chapter 2. The Hidden Door. At night, Chicago changed shape. A respectable street could look quiet from the outside. A shop window might be dark. A basement door might be locked. But behind the brick, behind the curtain, behind the false wall, music was playing. A man knocked 3 times. A small panel opened. Someone looked through. A password was whispered. Then the door opened, and the forbidden city appeared. Inside, smoke hung in the air like fog. Jazz bands played fast and hot. Glasses moved from hand to hand. Women in short dresses laughed beneath bobbed hair and cloche hats. Men in suits leaned close over small tables, speaking softly, watching the room. Waiters moved quickly, always aware of exits. The liquor was often terrible. Much of it was homemade, smuggled, diluted, colored, or dangerous. Bathtub gin could be mixed in apartments. Industrial alcohol could be stolen, redistilled, and sold as whiskey. Some drinks could blind a man. Some could kill him. But people drank anyway. Prohibition had created a new kind of glamour. To drink was no longer ordinary. It was rebellion. It was style. It was danger poured into a glass. And behind every glass was a supply chain. Someone had to make the alcohol. Someone had to move it. Someone had to bribe the police. Someone had to protect the trucks. Someone had to punish betrayal. In Chicago, that someone increasingly came from organized crime. Chapter 3. Johnny Torrio and the Business of Crime. Before Al Capone became the face of Prohibition, Chicago, there was Johnny Torrio. Torrio was not loud. He was not reckless. He thought like a businessman.
The numbers align with the
He
projections.
understood that prohibition
Deposit
was
the
not
funds,
just a
Mr.
moral
Davies.
law, it was a market
This route is
opportunity.
clear tonight.
Millions
And
of
the cash for
people
the
still
brewery?
wanted alcohol,
Stacks 1
and
through
now
5.
the legal
We divert
suppliers were
shipments here
gone.
until the heat dies down.
Torrio helped build an organization that treated illegal liquor like an industry. Breweries were hidden or controlled. Trucks moved through city streets at night. Speakeasies paid for protection. Police officers and politicians were placed on payrolls. Violence was used, but not randomly. It was a tool of business. At the center of this world stood Chicago's South Side, where crime, politics, and vice had long overlapped. The old red light districts, gambling houses, saloons, and political machines gave organized crime a foundation. Prohibition simply made the foundation richer. Then came Al Capone. Capone arrived from New York as a young man with a scarred face, sharp instincts, and a talent for publicity. He dressed well. He smiled for cameras. He gave quotes to reporters. He could appear generous, almost charming, while commanding an organization built on fear. To some, he looked like a celebrity gangster. To others, he was the visible symbol of a city losing control of itself. Chapter 4. Blood on the streets.
This route here cuts
The money was
transport time,
enormous,
but the brewery
and
takes
money
short
attracted
again.
war. Chicago's
O'Malley ain't
bootlegging
touching this
territory
shipment.
became a map of conflict.
That route belongs to
Gangs
us, and you
fought
know
for
it.
breweries,
Keep your men out of
routes,
our
neighborhoods,
The customers
and
want our
customers.
beer, not yours.
The
We go
North
where we
Side
please.
Gang, associated with figures like Dean O'Banion and later Bugs Moran, clashed with Capone's South Side organization. Alliances shifted. Meetings became traps. Cars slowed beside sidewalks. Windows shattered. Men fell in doorways, restaurants, garages, and flower shops. One of the most famous killings came in 1924 when Dean O'Banion was murdered inside his flower shop. The image felt almost unreal. A gangster, surrounded by flowers, killed in a place of beauty and ceremony. But that was Prohibition Chicago. Violence entering ordinary rooms. The weapons were modern. The Thompson submachine gun became part of the city's mythology. Cars made escape easier. Telephones spread orders quickly. Newspapers turned gang killings into daily theatre. And the public could not look away. Chicago became a symbol not simply because crime existed there, but because crime seemed organized, theatrical, and strangely visible. Gangsters went to baseball games. They ate in restaurants. They lived in hotels. Some were arrested and released. Some were protected. Some seemed more powerful than the law. The city had not become lawless overnight. It had become a place where law and crime did business together. Chapter 5. The police, the politicians, and the price of silence prohibition depended on enforcement. But enforcement depended on people. And people could be bought. A police officer earning a modest salary could be offered more money to look away than he made in weeks.
These are the campaign
A judge could be
contributions, Your Honor.
pressured. A
And the
politician
matter of the
could
liquor
receive
license.
campaign support.
I'll review them.
A local official could accept favors.
All right,
A
man,
raid
listen
could
close.
be announced before
This is
it
the
happened.
main entrance here.
A
The
shipment
moves along
could
this
pass through
alleyway.
unnoticed.
We hit them hard at the loading dock.
This was one of the central
I heard the copper
contradictions
joint on
of the
Fifth is
era.
still serving the good stuff.
A national
Yeah, but keep
law
it quiet.
demanded
The feds are
obedience from
everywhere.
cities that did not fully believe in it, could not properly enforce it, or profited from ignoring it. Chicago's political machine was especially suited to this world. Ward politics had long been built on loyalty and favors. Prohibition added rivers of cash to an already flexible system. The result was not simply crime in the streets, it was corruption in the architecture of the city.
We move the barrels here.
A speakeasy was not just a hidden
Already
bar.
handled. Keep the
It was
ledger tight.
connected to a brewer, a driver,
Tuesday, see
a
it there.
gang, a
O'Malley's
police
watching the south
contact,
route, but
a
Thompson
politician,
cleared the north side.
and a
Get this
customer
whiskey
base.
through by dawn.
Every drink represented a chain of
Just keep the noise
compromise.
down.
The law
We just
had
paid
tried
off
to
the
separate
precinct, and
America
we
from
need to square this
alcohol.
ledger before the
Instead,
next raid.
it connected alcohol to almost everything. Chapter 6. ordinary lives in an extraordinary time. Behind the legends of Capone and gang wars were ordinary Chicagoans trying to live through the noise. A factory worker might finish a shift and enter a backroom bar because it was warmer than his apartment. A young woman might dance in a speakeasy because the new decade promised freedoms her mother never had. A jazz musician might play until dawn, paid in cash, watching gangsters tip generously from front tables. A shopkeeper might pay protection money because refusal was too dangerous. A police officer might tell himself one envelope did not make him corrupt. Prohibition changed the rhythm of daily life. It changed dating, nightlife, music, policing, politics, and even architecture. Basements became clubs. Storefronts became masks. Private homes became drinking rooms.
The evening's finest.
Hotels became meeting places.
Much obliged.
Restaurants learned to serve coffee cups that did not contain coffee. And Chicago's women stood at the center of another contradiction. Many women had supported temperance because alcohol had destroyed homes, wages, and families. In working-class households, a drinking husband could mean hunger, violence,
suffering
or
because of the
poverty.
scourge of drink.
For
Prohibition is the only
reformers,
answer to end this
prohibition
cycle of violence and
was meant to
poverty.
protect women and children. Yet the 1920s also brought the image of the flapper, young women drinking, smoking, dancing, and stepping into public nightlife in ways that shocked older generations. The law, meant to create moral discipline, helped create a culture of stylish defiance. The city became a stage where old morality and new freedom collided every night. Chapter 7. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre. By 1929, the violence reached its most infamous image. On the morning of February 14th, 7 men connected to the North Side gang were lined up against a garage wall at 2122 North Clark Street and shot to death. The killers, some reportedly dressed like police officers, vanished. The event became known as the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. The photograph of the aftermath shocked the nation. This was no longer just bootlegging. This looked like urban warfare. The massacre damaged Capone's public image and intensified pressure on federal authorities. Even people who had laughed at Prohibition's absurdities began to fear what the illegal alcohol economy had created. Capone was never convicted for the massacre. Instead, he was eventually brought down by tax evasion. It was a strange ending, but fitting for the era. The government struggled to defeat the violence directly, so it followed the money. In 1931, Capone was convicted and later sent to prison. The most famous gangster in America was not imprisoned for murder, but for failing to pay taxes on an empire that officially did not exist. Chapter 8. The End of the Dry Dream. By the early 1930s, the promise of prohibition had collapsed. The Great Depression changed the national mood. The government needed tax revenue. Many Americans were tired of hypocrisy, corruption, and violence. The idea that banning alcohol would purify the nation seemed increasingly impossible to defend. In 1933, the 21st Amendment repealed prohibition. Legal alcohol returned. But the world prohibition had created did not simply disappear. Organized crime had gained money, structure, and influence. The public had learned to distrust certain moral crusades. Cities had learned how profitable illegality could be. Law enforcement had learned that banning demand does not erase demand. Chicago moved forward, as it always had. New buildings rose, old neighborhoods changed. The river was cleaned. The stockyards eventually faded. Jazz clubs became memory. Speakeasies became tourist stories, cocktail bars, basement lounges, and legends. But the shadow remained. Today, when people walk through Chicago, they see a city of glass towers, lakefront parks, museums, trains, bridges, and neighborhoods full of life. Yet beneath the modern city is another Chicago, one of hidden doors, wet streets, police whistles, newspaper boys, backroom deals, and engines idling in the dark. Prohibition. Chicago was not just a story about alcohol. It was a story about what happens when law tries to command desire, when morality becomes policy, when poverty meets opportunity, and when a city's hidden systems become stronger than its public rules. The glasses are empty now. The old garages are gone or transformed. The men in fedoras have become photographs. But the question remains alive. Can a society ban what millions still want, without creating something worse in the shadows? Chicago, in 1920, answered that question in smoke, jazz, money, and blood.